I need to have a chat with the author. This was supposed to be a kid's book. Okay, I have to share this quote with you right out of the gate because it is just too good. It actually comes from a modern author on Reddit who is sharing a manuscript where their 12-year-old protagonist literally shatters the fourth wall mid-story. And right off the bat, I think it perfectly captures just how much children's books have evolved. We are definitely no longer living in an era where stories just talk down to kids. Instead, we've entered this playful, highly intelligent, and incredibly dynamic storytelling landscape.
So, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into a truly fascinating transformation. We're going to explore how classic, simple, and, let's be honest, often heavily moralistic tales have evolved into these rich, inclusive adventures that validate the actual lived experiences of modern kids. It is an absolutely incredible shift in the publishing industry, and understanding it gives us a really profound look into how we're shaping the next generation.
Here is how we're going to break things down today. We'll start with the evolution of storytelling, and then we're going to use this amazing, famous framework created by education scholar Rudine Sims Bishop. We'll look at mirrors for diversity and inclusivity, windows for navigating real-world themes, and doors for the modern craft of writing. Finally, we'll look ahead at what's coming in the 2026 publishing landscape.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the evolution of storytelling.
To really grasp where we are today, we have to understand how the industry shifted away from basic moral instruction. If you look back before the mid-20th century, children's books were highly didactic. That's just a fancy way of saying they were strictly designed to teach you a lesson. But things started to change. In the 1950s, the modern era really kicked off with authors like E.B. White and C.S. Lewis. They proved, hey, kids can actually handle heavy themes like mortality and sacrifice. Then we hit the 1970s, and authors like Judy Blume completely blew the doors off by bringing in realistic fiction, tackling taboo stuff like puberty and divorce. Fast forward to the 1990s, and Harry Potter totally changes the game. It proved that highly complex, multi-layered youth literature wasn't just popular, it was a global commercial powerhouse. And that momentum brings us right into the 2020s and beyond, an era totally defined by a massive explosion in diverse representation and a real eagerness to tackle modern real-world issues head-on.
That brings us to Section 2, Mirrors, focusing on diversity and inclusivity.
The whole concept of mirrors centers on this vital idea that every single child needs to see their own face, their own family, and their own experiences reflected in what they read. Think about the classic tropes you and I probably grew up with. Sleeping Beauty literally just sleeps. Snow White faints. The heroes were almost always male, the princesses waited passively for rescue, and the communities were, well, pretty homogenous. But modern publishers are actively pivoting away from that. The modern shift is giving us active problem solvers completely regardless of gender. We're seeing emotionally aware, empathetic princes and stories filled with diverse, blended, and non-traditional families that actually look like the real world.
Let's actually look at what this modern representation looks like in action, because it's so cool. You have books like The Paper Bag Princess, which completely flip the script by having the princess outsmart the dragon and then decide, you know what, I'm actually not going to marry this ungrateful prince. You have Julian as a mermaid, which is this beautiful, gentle exploration of identity. And the best part? This is a global movement. Over in India, for example, new series are deliberately portraying empathetic princes and wildly confident problem-solving princesses, stepping away from strictly Western mythologies to validate local lived experiences. We're also seeing a massive, wonderful rise in differently abled heroes taking center stage, proving once and for all that courage and adventure belong to absolutely everyone.
Moving right along to Section 3, Windows and navigating real-world themes.
So, if a mirror reflects a child's own life, a window offers them a safe vantage point to look out at the broader and sometimes pretty daunting real world. Authors today are using the symbolic magic of stories to help kids navigate heavy realities. Take ecofiction, which is huge right now. Books like The Wild Robot explore climate survival and our deep connection to nature in a way that can completely captivate a 6-year-old. For slightly older kids, you have masterpieces like A Monster Calls, which uses this fantastical, terrifying tree to help a young boy process the impending loss of his mother to cancer. Then there are brilliant authors like Jacqueline Woodson who provide crucial windows into social inequality. The true magic of these modern tales is that they aren't taking a heavy-handed, preachy political stance. Instead, they use symbolism to create just enough emotional distance, making massive, complicated themes like grief and climate change bearable and understandable for a young, developing mind.
Which leads us to Section 4, Doors, and how we're crafting the modern tale.
We've talked a lot about the themes, but how are authors actually building these doors to invite readers inside the story? Well, it's fascinating, because even though the heroes themselves have modernized, the underlying architectural framework actually hasn't. The hero's journey, also known as the monomyth, is still incredibly prevalent. You know the pattern. A hero leaves their familiar world, faces a bunch of crazy trials, and returns completely transformed. The reason authors still use this is that it provides a really deep psychological sense of security. Kids intuitively know that even when things get super scary in the middle of the book, there's a structure here, and the hero is going to find a way through. It's that comforting, reliable frame that allows authors to push the boundaries of the content inside.
But where authors are playing around is in how that story is delivered. Breaking the fourth wall is such a fantastic modern tool. This is when a character knows they're in a book and talks right directly to the reader. Think of Lemony Snicket urgently warning you to put the book down because the story is just too depressing. As we saw in our opening quote today, modern writers use this technique not just for a quick laugh, but to make children actively think about the actual vehicle of storytelling. It literally makes the reader a co-conspirator in the adventure.
And what's really amazing is how this narrative craft scales brilliantly as a child's brain develops. Look at this breakdown. From 0 to 4 years old, kids aren't analyzing complex plots. They're absorbing sound, rhythm, and repetition. Then from 4 to 8, they enter this fantasy stage where they start deeply engaging with moral questions. This is actually the perfect time to read them a classic fairy tale, follow it up with a modern retelling, and just ask them to compare the two. By 8 and older, kids can finally handle ambiguity. They start to realize the world isn't purely good or evil. That is exactly when complex characters, shifting perspectives, and stories told from the villain's point of view become incredibly stimulating for their cognitive development.
All right, let's bring it home with Section 5, the 2026 publishing landscape.
Looking forward, current publishing data reveals some absolutely fascinating trends that are set to dominate the industry by 2026. First up, we are seeing a massive surge in mindful tech use narratives. Books like Patrick Picklebottom and The Penny Book feature protagonists who actively choose a physical book over drones, video games, or scrolling on social media. It's a brilliant way to model healthy boundaries with technology, but doing it in a fun, non-preachy way. Second, there is a huge resurgence happening with seasonal and traditional retellings, which really helps anchor kids in familiar rhythms in a fast-paced world. Third, graphic novels are exploding right now. They use visual storytelling to capture reluctant readers who might otherwise struggle with dense text. And finally, there is a massive deepening trend in digital personalization.
Let's actually pause on that personalization piece for a second, because research shows it is so much more than just a cute novelty. When a child sees their own name or even their own face woven directly into a story, the gap between fiction and reality completely vanishes for them. Studies actually show that making the child the literal hero of the text significantly boosts their motivation to read. It helps them internalize the story's core message much more deeply. It is turning out to be an unbelievably powerful tool to build lifelong literacy confidence.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to chew on. We've seen how stories have evolved from these rigid little lectures into vibrant, inclusive, and empowering journeys. Take a second and think about what classic stories shaped your own childhood. What hidden values did they quietly instill in you? And as you look at the kids in your life today, what new mirrors, windows, and doors will you choose to open for them? Because make no mistake, the stories we put on their shelves today are exactly what will shape the world they build tomorrow. Keep exploring, keep reading, and I will catch you in the next explainer.